Like many people around the world, I was anxiously awaiting the premiere of the newest Barbie movie, directed by Greta Gerwig and starring popular actors such as Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling or America Ferrera. It was basically guaranteed to be a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience ever since the first teaser trailer dropped, and honestly, maybe even before that. I have to say, it was absolutely amazing to see people of all ages storm the theaters wearing all these different shades of pink and waiting to see this movie. At least where I live, it's not something that happens very often, so it really felt like a significant moment in pop culture, something that you don't really experience very often. And needless to say, I absolutely love this movie. I enjoyed its humor, its cleverness, the social commentary, as well as the general celebration of the color pink and Barbie doll's origins. And I really think that it's kind of impressive that this movie was even created in the first place. Barbie is one of the most recognizable brands in the world. The first Barbie was created in 1959 by Ruth Handler, who was inspired by a doll called Lily, which was based on a comic character from a German tabloid. Originally, Lily wasn't even a doll for kids, but rather for grown men, so you can imagine that the history of Barbie is actually quite controversial. If you're interested in learning more about it, there's a documentary show on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us, and the second episode of the first season is all about Barbie dolls, their origins, creators, and how they changed throughout the years. It's a short but very interesting watch. You can see how Barbie dolls used to reflect the ever-changing fashion trends. You might be surprised to learn that Ruth Handler, the creator of Barbie, who was actually a character in the movie, was fined and sentenced to community service after making false reports and essentially committing fraud. So yeah, even though nowadays Barbie is an iconic character and the highest grossing doll of all time, its origins included a lot of controversy and backlash, which is kind of ironic when you look at some of the discourse that is going on right now regarding this new movie. I will talk about it a little more later in this video, but for now, let's concentrate on what made this movie so popular long before its premiere and why a live-action film about a Barbie doll would even attract so many people in the first place. First of all, the sets and props made for this movie are genuinely impressive. Barbie Land both looks and feels like you are in a human-sized dollhouse, where everything is made of plastic and more beautiful and vibrant than it could ever be in reality. I was actually getting quite impatient during the scenes set in the real world because I just wanted to go back to this beautiful, obnoxiously pink place and spend as much time as possible among all the different Barbies. The attention to detail is genuinely insane, and after I came back home, I actually sat down and just stared at some stills from this movie because I was so impressed with how dedicated the creators were to creating this illusion of a world that looks straight out of your imagination. Honestly, I had insane expectations, but I feel like I would have been satisfied if the whole movie consisted of nothing but us following all the Barbies around the Barbie Land and nothing else. And it really says a lot about how immersive the world created by Gerwig is. As someone who was a little girl at some point, a girl who also had this very rich imaginary world full of stories, it felt very nostalgic, almost like a tribute to these childhood memories and all the stories you came up with while playing with your dolls. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that would capture this childish idea of a perfect world accurately, but this one came really close. Like I said, the attention to detail in this film is really spectacular, especially all the different references to Barbie dolls and accessories, like the dolls that were discontinued, or all the iconic outfits worn by the characters. In many ways, it really feels like a love letter to the Barbie franchise, one that at the same time is not afraid to make fun of it and uses it to its advantage. It just embraces the silliness in a way that feels really genuine and fun. It's a fascinating combination of a writing that both takes itself very seriously at times, especially when it has something meaningful to say, while still being relatively light in tone and very playful. It's silly and it is supposed to be silly, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The actors gave amazing performances, and I feel like I really should mention the choreography, especially in the dance number at the beginning of the movie and during the I'm Just Ken scene. I am absolutely serious when I say that whoever was responsible for that should receive a raise. And I say it as someone who most of the time doesn't really pay much attention to stuff like that. I mean, obviously I can recognize when it's good, but I hardly ever find myself with my eyes glued to the screen and afraid that if I allow myself to blink, I'm going to miss something. So yeah, there's a lot to love about this movie, and while there are some things that I could criticize, I think at its core it's just playful and inventive, and it manages to find the right balance between what it wants to say and the comedic aspects of it. But above all else, one thing that really caught my attention was how it approaches the topic of aging and growth. And it's not necessarily a surprising thing. I think a lot of Greta Gerwig's movies focus on these topics and do a really good job exploring them on screen. It was basically guaranteed that in a movie about an iconic doll that's been there for decades and grew up with entire generations of kids, the topic might come up at some point. What I did not expect though is how much it would resonate with me. You see, aging in women is something that is still a bit of a taboo. We usually discuss it in the context of wrinkles, beauty products designed to hide the first signs of aging, and I think a lot of women still grow up with this idea that aging is something shameful, something you have to slow down as much as possible. From a very young age, we are taught that we have to take care of our appearance and that traits like youthfulness and attractiveness are desired in a woman much more than her aspirations or talents. And we see it everywhere, especially in the entertainment industry, with the actresses being tossed aside as they age, given much less opportunities and roles than their male counterparts. Of course, people are becoming much more aware of these things. There are entire movements focused solely on making a change for the better, but whether we like it or not, it's still a very prevalent thing in our everyday life. It is what young girls still tend to internalize growing up. Which I think is why the scene where Barbie meets an old woman at the bus stop and the first thing that leaves her mouth as she looks at her is "You're beautiful" was such a powerful and meaningful moment that honestly felt like a punch to the stomach. We are so used to associating youth and attractiveness with beauty that this simple sentence felt almost groundbreaking, especially because of its significance in the context of the story. At this moment, Barbie is at her lowest. She's going through all these changes that she doesn't understand. She's confused, she's lost, and she sees an old woman, probably for the first time in her life, and she sees her as beautiful. And she voices that, forgetting for a moment about this new feeling of pain and hopelessness that she's experiencing. And the woman simply smiles and says that she knows. I have no words. It was perfect. The significance and the message of this scene alone made this movie truly exceptional to me. Especially in the context of these perfect dolls who never grow up and are forever stuck as beautiful, smiling figures with fulfilling careers and dreamlike lives. Because we know that as beautiful as it sounds, it's simply impossible. And that's okay too. Getting to grow up and experience all the aspects of being human is its own kind of beauty, one that we often forget about. And it definitely adds another layer to the message that you can be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do that basically became the foundation of the Barbie franchise. I love how scenes like these help Barbie recontextualize these changes that she's going through. Yes, they seem scary at first, but they are part of human experience. A part that is important and necessary. And unlike dolls, we can't escape them. All we can really do is make peace with this process and learn to embrace it. Aging is just part of life, and even though it can be overwhelming and terrifying, it's also beautiful. It's yet another step in our journey. I think the way Barbie frames this process as something natural and valuable is really meaningful. It's not the kind of message you would expect from what is basically a glorified doll commercial, and yet here we are. This movie has a very unique approach to the topic of womanhood, and even though at times it feels a little too on the nose, especially during that little speech delivered by America Ferrera's character, I have to say that it feels very Greta Gerwig, in a sense that she's known for movies that really try to explore all the different ways of not only being a woman, but also how change and growth play into this female experience. I think that if it was directed by anyone else, I wouldn't enjoy this movie nearly as much as I did, and even though this speech about all the contradictory ways in which women are expected to perform femininity felt somewhat out of place, I can't help but appreciate it for what it's trying to convey. It reminds me a lot of Amy's speech in Gerwig's 2018 adaptation of The Little Women, and it's scenes like these that really make me admire her as a director and a writer. Whether you think that the Barbie movie is a masterpiece or consider it to be a capitalistic cash grab, I think it goes without saying that Gerwig managed to take an IP that's been recognizable all around the world for decades, and she did something new and fresh with it, challenging and changing the way we are used to view the Barbie franchise. In my opinion, this is why people are so drawn to this movie. It's extremely challenging to take something that we know so well and approach it from a completely different angle. It's very clear when you look at some other popular franchises, which after a while start to feel incredibly repetitive. or are put in the hands of people who simply want to capitalize on them, and don't really care about satisfying the audiences or acknowledging the source material. This is not the case with the Barbie movie. It shows that Gerwig cared a lot about writing a story that will resonate with people who used to play with Barbie dolls, and she clearly did a lot of research in order to make the Barbie land as immersive as possible, including putting in a lot of fun references to all the different dolls that were produced throughout the years. Again, I kind of wish that Ferrara's speech was written more seamlessly into the movie, because while it made sense in the context, it still felt a little off, and I've seen some people share the same opinion. I do love the way Ferrara delivered it though. I loved her as Amy in Superstore, and I think she really shines as an actress in scenes where you can see raw emotion like that. And it's absolutely not a criticism towards the actress. I think she did an amazing job with the role, and I'd love to see her in more projects in the future. In fact, the speech itself was also very good, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people. It was cutting, well written, and captured the reality of what it feels like to be a woman in a world that's been largely designed by men and for men. It's powerful to see a woman be given a space to point out all the ways in which society places these unrealistic expectations on us, and how it affects the way you see the world. I mentioned it before, but really all of the performances were very strong, with Ryan Gosling earning himself an honorable mention for his role of Ken. I know there was some controversy related to his age before the movie came out, with many people saying that he's not a good choice for the role, but I think after seeing this movie, most people will have to agree that he was made to play Ken. I'm pretty sure that the song I'm Just Ken will be stuck in my head for days, and honestly, I'm not mad about it. And while it is rather unlikely, I think Gosling really deserves an Oscar for his performance. I don't think it was an easy character to play, and it shows his range as an actor very well. Not to mention that his commitment to the role was truly exceptional. Another thing that I love is that you can tell that both he and Margot really enjoyed working on this movie. It's something that almost radiates from the screen. They have an incredible chemistry with each other as well as with other cast members, and it definitely adds to the overall experience. I've always been impressed with Gerwig's ability to guide the actors that she's working with in a way that really allows them to deliver strong and convincing performances. And this is the number one reason why I think that all these voices that she's selling out feel kind of like baseless accusations from people who didn't like the movie on principle. While some scenes may come off as a little bit too preachy, and there are definitely going to be some people unhappy with its overall tone and message, I actually find it refreshing to see a female director who's doing something new, playing with the form and challenging
what
the
do
norms.
I have to do?
Moreover, I feel like this movie is going to age very well because it plays into all these nostalgic elements that are relatable for many people, especially women. It's also surprisingly artistic and timeless, with all these different sets and the all commercial vibe. Like, I can see myself watching it 10 years from now and still having a good time. Especially since, even though some people claim that it's anti-men, I think the message is actually quite universal, regardless of your gender identity. And some of the things it's trying to say are quite thought-provoking, challenging the viewer to think about things like the purpose of gender roles in the modern world, or what it means to be a person. Even though Barbie is, at its core, a comedy, it knows how to present serious themes in a way that doesn't make fun of them, but rather allows the audience to inspire some surprisingly deep conversations. Although I have to say, I got the impression that some themes definitely deserved a little more screen time. They didn't feel as fleshed out as I wish they were. For instance, the theme of motherhood could probably benefit from the movie being a little bit longer. It's not a big criticism, by the way, just at times it felt like it bit off more than it can chew, if that makes sense. But then again, the themes which were the heart of the movie were done really well, so no complaints here. Finally, I feel like I have to comment on the accusations that this movie is too feminist or even that it's anti-men, and just... My personal opinion is that if you watched it and your final conclusion was that this movie's message is fuck men, then you did not understand it. Especially given that Ken's character is possibly one of the most nuanced characters in the whole movie, and he's given a lot of screen time. Of course, having a lot of screen time doesn't automatically mean that a character is well written, but my point is that we spent a lot of time with Ken, and we really get to understand his point of view. In fact, I would argue that one of the core messages that the Barbie movie is trying to convey is also directly tied to Ken's own character arc. showing that the status quo made him unhappy and that being dependent on another person and never getting to form your own identity outside of them is unhealthy. He has to become his own person and choose his own path, otherwise he will always be unhappy and jealous of everyone around him. And trying to reinvent patriarchy and bringing it to the Barbie land didn't bring him the happiness he thought it would. Not only was it superficial, but it was yet another way to get Barbie's attention, which is something that he had to unlearn and give himself a chance to learn how to rely on himself and other Kens instead. He can't live in Barbie's shadow forever, trying to get her to notice him and then spiraling when it doesn't happen. He's a representation of what happens when you allow your insecurities to dictate your actions, and instead of working on yourself, you try to force your way on everyone else. It's not about putting men down, but rather pointing out that you have to live for yourself and your choices are yours to make. Yes, the movie makes a point to say that the patriarchal system is oppressive in nature, and it does tell women that they can be whoever they want to be, but that works both ways, and the movie is very explicit about it. I find both Ken and Barbie's endings to be very empowering, and like I said before, I do consider them to be universal. It wasn't a male or female message, it was a message about identity and change, and how we choose to experience life. Ken had to learn how to stop making Barbie the center of his universe, and Barbie had to come to terms with the fact that the life she lived before wasn't what she needed or wanted. She decided to become human because she saw value in all these little things that are often so scary to us, like aging or change. The real world is not perfect, and being a woman in a man-dominated world comes with a lot of challenges and difficulties. There are a lot of expectations that are placed on us, and they often feel contradictory, and like no matter what we do, we can't please everyone. It's not easy to navigate these things, and I think sometimes everyone would like to just go to this bright and colorful place where everyone's happy and all you have to do is attend parties. But as tempting as it sounds, real life is not a doll commercial. This Barbie Land utopia isn't exactly something that can be achieved. It doesn't mean that the world is devoid of value though, or that we should just lay down and give up. Barbie even says at some point that even though at first experiencing tears was weird and unpleasant, eventually she learned to appreciate this feeling and the relief it brings. And it's a really nice metaphor about how even the experiences that we tend to see as bad have a purpose, and they do enrich our life in some way. I don't know, I think it's a beautiful message, especially nowadays when sometimes everything feels so messy and hopeless. It just relates to this very human experience of feeling lost and unsure. Overall, I like how sentimental this movie is, how it brings you back to the time where you could spend hours in your imaginary little world, just playing with dolls and feeling like there are no limits. It lets you reach out to that inner child that you still carry with you. Growing up and the changes that come along with it can feel intimidating and scary, but that's part of life. I realize that this is not a movie for everyone, and if you didn't like it, I think that's perfectly fine. I also agree that some of the themes would have benefited from a little more screen time. I appreciate that Gerwig and all the other writers who worked on the script were willing to take risks and bring us a story that can be surprisingly deep for what it is. Even if you disliked it or didn't agree with the movie's message, I think the conversations that it provoked are good and have a lot of value. And I really hope that more movies like this one will come out in future years, because it proves that film as a medium still has a lot to offer and can be quite thought-provoking. And lastly, I urge you to support writers and actors who are currently fighting for their rights. The unions representing both writers and actors are striking together for the first time in 60 years, demanding better pay and contracts that prevent artificial intelligence from replacing them at their jobs. It's something that affects all of us, and it goes way beyond some of your favorite movies or TV shows getting cancelled or stopping production until some kind of agreement is made. The hard work of actors and writers is not something that can be replaced by AI, and the way they are treated by streaming services is honestly shameful and never should have been allowed. I will be dropping some useful resources and articles regarding the strikes to help you better understand what is going on and give you the tools to support them, whether it's through donations or simply by spreading the awareness about the situation. It's really important to understand what is happening and why and how the decisions made might change not just the working conditions of those on strike, but also the entire industry. Overall, I was truly happy with the Barbie movie, and I'm already planning to go to see it again. I think I would rate it as a solid 8 out of 10, maybe even a 9. It's not perfect by any means, but it has some truly powerful moments of storytelling, a beautiful message, and a lot of fun jokes and insightful comments on society as a whole. I'm very curious what you guys thought about this movie and how you would rate it. I think it's fascinating just how polarizing a story about a doll can be, so I'm looking forward to see what you have to say about it. Also, I wanted to apologize if my voice sounded a little weird in this video. I have been dealing with some teeth and jaw related issues lately, which makes speaking a bit difficult, especially in English, which is not my first language. I fully intend to post more videos like this one in the future, so if it's something that you enjoyed, it would mean the world to me if you liked or shared your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time!